Ethan McAllister stood alone in the dying field, watching his last cow collapse into the dust. The animal's legs folded beneath her, and she didn't get up. He dropped to his knees beside her, hands shaking, knowing he couldn't save her. Knowing he couldn't save any of it. The bank wanted $800 in 30 days. The drought had taken everything else. And somewhere on a stagecoach heading toward him was a woman who thought she was coming to a working ranch. If you love stories of grit, survival, and second chances, subscribe now and follow this journey to the end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Ethan buried the cow before noon. He dug the hole himself, shovel, biting into earth so dry it cracked like old leather. Sweat ran down his back, soaking through his shirt, pooling at his waistband. The July sun beat down without mercy, same as it had for 6 weeks straight. When he finished, he stood over the mound of dirt and took off his hat. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I couldn't do better by you." The words felt hollow. They were the same words he'd said to his partner 2 years ago, bleeding out in a canyon outside El Paso. The same words that haunted him every night since. He put his hat back on and walked toward the house. Doc Samuel Harding sat on the porch, a glass of water sweating in his hand. The old man had been Ethan's only friend since he'd arrived in Copper Creek 8 months ago. He was 63, silver-haired, and had a way of seeing through people that made lying to him pointless. "That's the 4th one this month," Doc said. "I know. You can't keep burying them yourself, son. It'll break you." Ethan climbed the porch steps and sat down heavily. "What else am I supposed to do?" Doc was quiet for a moment. "The stage comes in at 3. You remember that, don't you?" Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd been trying not to think about it. "She's still coming?" Doc asked. "Far as I know." "You gonna tell her the truth?" Ethan stared out at the brown, cracked fields. The creek that used to run along the eastern boundary had dried up 2 weeks ago. The only water left was the spring near the north pasture, and even that was barely a trickle now. "I'll tell her," he said. "Before or after she sees what she's walking into." "Doc." "I'm not judging you, Ethan." The old man's voice softened. "Lord knows desperation makes fools of all of us. But that woman is traveling across the country expecting something you can't give her. She deserves to know." Ethan rubbed his face with both hands. "I know she does." "Then why'd you do it? Why put that ad in the paper?" The question sat between them heavy and unanswered. Ethan had asked himself the same thing 100 times since he'd mailed that letter. Land roof future. 3 words that had felt like truth when he wrote them. 3 words that now felt like the worst kind of lie. "I thought I could turn it around," he said finally. "I thought if I had someone, if I wasn't alone out here, maybe I could make it work. And now," Ethan looked at him, "now I'm just hoping she doesn't hate me too much when she finds out what she's really getting." Doc finished his water and set the glass down. "I've known a lot of men in my years, Ethan. Good men, bad men, and everything in between. You're not a bad man. You made a mistake. Question is, what are you gonna do about it?" "I don't know." "Well," Doc stood, bones creaking. "You've got about 3 hours to figure it out. I'd suggest you start with a bath. You smell like death and hard work." Despite everything, Ethan almost smiled. "Thanks, Doc." "Don't thank me. Just don't make that woman regret coming here more than she already will." The stagecoach was late. Ethan stood at the edge of town, hat pulled low against the sun, watching the road. Copper Creek wasn't much of a town, a main street with a general store, a saloon, a bank, and a handful of other buildings that had seen better days. The drought had hit everyone hard. Half the ranches in the county were struggling, and Wade Thornton had bought up 3 of them already. Ethan tried not to think about Thornton. Tried not to think about the offer the man had made last week, standing in Ethan's yard like he already owned the place. $500, Thornton had said. That's more than fair for land this dried up. It's worth 3 times that, and you know it. It was worth 3 times that, before the drought, before you let it fall apart. Thornton had smiled that cold smile that never reached his eyes. Face it, McAllister. You're not a rancher. You're a lawman playing farmer. Sell to me now while you still have a choice. Ethan had told him to get off his land. Thornton had left, but not before saying, I'll be back, and next time the offer will be lower. The sound of wheels pulled Ethan from the memory. The stagecoach appeared over the rise, dust billowing behind it, horses lathered and tired from the heat. Ethan's chest tightened. This was it. The coach rolled to a stop in front of the general store. The driver climbed down, stretched his back, and started unloading luggage. A family emerged first, a tired-looking couple with 2 small children. Then an older man in a suit, probably a banker or a lawyer. Then her. She stepped down carefully, one hand gripping the doorframe for balance. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 27 or 28, with dark hair pinned up beneath a simple bonnet. Her dress was plain practical, showing signs of careful mending at the hem. She carried herself straight, shoulders back, chin up, but there was something guarded in her eyes, something that said she'd learned not to expect much from the world. She looked around, taking in the town, the people, the heat. Then her gaze found him. Ethan walked forward. Miss Sutton. That's right. Her voice was steady, controlled. You must be Mr. McAllister. Ethan? He reached for her trunk, but she'd already picked it up herself. I can take that. I've got it. He paused, then nodded. Wagons this way. They walked in silence. Ethan could feel her studying him, measuring him against whatever picture she'd built in her mind from his letters. He wondered what she saw. A tall man with calloused hands and tired eyes. A man who looked like he hadn't slept properly in months. When they reached the wagon, she set her trunk in the back without help. Ethan noticed the way she moved, efficient, capable, no wasted motion. She climbed up onto the seat before he could offer his hand. Your letters said you had cattle, she said as he took the reins. I did. Did. Ethan clicked his tongue and the horses started forward. There's some things I need to tell you, Miss Sutton. Things I should have put in those letters, but didn't. She was quiet for a moment. I figured as much. He glanced at her. You did. A man doesn't advertise for a wife unless he's either too proud to court one proper or too desperate for anyone to say yes. Her eyes met his unflinching. Which one are you, Mr. McAllister? The question hit him like a fist to the gut. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. Both, he said. Maybe both. She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer. Then I reckon you'd better tell me the rest before we get to wherever we're going. I don't like surprises. So he told her. He told her about the drought, the worst in 20 years. About the cattle dying one by one, too weak to survive the heat. About the creek drying up and the well running low. About the bank demanding $800 in 30 days and the buyer circling like a vulture waiting for him to fail. He told her about the ad, about the lie of omission, about the desperation that had made him send those letters, promising things he couldn't deliver. When he finished, they'd been riding for nearly an hour. The ranch was visible now, a distant collection of buildings, shimmering in the heat. It looked small from here, small and broken and barely standing. Clara was quiet for a long moment. You should have told me, she said finally. I know. I came here with $5 to my name, Mr. McAllister. $5 and 5 horses. Her voice was calm, but something hard lived underneath it. My father raised the finest horses in Kentucky. When he died, my brother took everything. Said a woman had no business running a breeding operation. Sold off the stock. Kept the money, turned me out with nothing but the clothes on my back and the 5 mares he couldn't sell because they were too wild for anyone else to handle. Ethan looked at her. She was staring straight ahead, jaw set. I spent the last of my money on stage fare to get here, she continued. I have nowhere else to go. No family who'll take me, no skills anyone wants to pay for, nothing except those horses and 20 years of knowing how to train them. She turned to face him fully. So before you apologize again for lying to me, understand something. I didn't come here looking for a fairy tale. I came here looking for a chance. A real one. Can you give me that? Ethan held her gaze. I don't know. That's the first honest thing you've said to me. Miss Sutton. Clara. She looked back at the road. If we're going to do this, you might as well use my name. Clara. He tested the word. It felt strange on his tongue, unfamiliar. I won't lie to you again. Whatever happens from here, you'll know the truth of it. Good. She straightened in her seat. Now tell me about this buyer, the one circling like a vulture. What's his name? Wade Thornton. Something flickered across her face. Recognition. Fear. It was gone before he could identify it. Thornton, she repeated quietly. Big man, silver hair, owns half the county. You know him. Clara's hands tightened in her lap. I know of him. His reputation reaches further than Montana, Mr. McAllister. He bought my uncle's ranch in Wyoming 3 years ago, paid half what it was worth, and smiled while he did it. Her voice dropped. My uncle shot himself 6 months later. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be smart. She looked at him, and for the first time he saw fire in her eyes. Real fire, the kind that burned away everything soft and left only steel behind. Men like Thornton don't just want land. They want to break people. They want to watch you crawl before they take everything you have. If you're going to fight him, you need to understand that. I'm not sure I can fight him. Not with what I've got left. What do you have left? Ethan thought about it. 12 cattle barely alive, a well that's running dry, a barn that needs a new roof, and 30 days before the bank takes it all. Clara was quiet. They were close to the ranch now, close enough to see the details. The sagging fence, the empty corral, the fields of brown and yellow where green should have been. What about water? She asked. There's a spring on the north pasture, only one still running in the county. Thornton needs it for his cattle. That's why he wants my land so bad. Then that's your leverage. Ethan blinked. What? The spring. If it's the only water left, every rancher in the county needs access to it, including Thornton. Clara's mind was working now, he could see it. How many ranchers are left, the ones Thornton hasn't bought out? 4, maybe 5. And they're all struggling, losing cattle to the drought. Same as me. Clara nodded slowly. Then you don't sell them water. You trade for it. Labor supplies, whatever you need. You build alliances, Mr. McAllister. You make yourself too valuable to fail. Ethan stared at her. He'd been so focused on survival that he hadn't thought about strategy. Hadn't thought about anything except putting one foot in front of the other until the ground gave way beneath him. That might work, he said slowly. But it doesn't solve the bank problem. $800 in 30 days. No. Clara's eyes went to the horizon where her horses would be delivered tomorrow. But I might have an idea about that too. What kind of idea? She almost smiled. Almost. The army's buying horses. Cavalry mounts for the campaigns out west. I heard about it on the stage. They're paying top dollar for trained animals, and their buying deadline is August 10th. That's 25 days from now. You think you can train wild horses in 25 days? I think I can train my horses in 25 days. They're not wild, Mr. McAllister. They're difficult. There's a difference. The wagon rolled into the yard. Ethan pulled the horses to a stop and sat there looking at the woman beside him. She wasn't what he'd expected. She wasn't soft or naive or looking for someone to save her. She was sharp, practical, and already thinking 3 steps ahead. He'd sent for a wife. He'd gotten something else entirely. This isn't what you signed up for, he said quietly. You came here expecting a partnership, a home, not a fight. Clara climbed down from the wagon. She stood in the dusty yard looking at the broken ranch, the dying land, the weight of everything that needed to be fixed. Then she turned back to him. "I've been fighting my whole life, Mr. McAllister. My father taught me that nothing worth having comes easy. My brother taught me that the world doesn't care what's fair. And Wade Thornton." Her jaw tightened. "Men like him taught me that sometimes the only way to survive is to refuse to quit." She picked up her trunk. "Show me where I'm sleeping. Tomorrow my horses arrive, and then we get to work." Ethan watched her walk toward the house. The sun was setting behind her, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. The heat of the day was finally breaking, but something else was building. He didn't know if they could save this place. Didn't know if 25 days was enough time to train horses, raise money, and hold off a man like Thornton. But for the first time in months, Ethan McAllister felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. The horses arrived at dawn. Clara was already standing at the fence when the wagon crested the hill. 5 mares tied to the back pulling against their leads like they wanted to tear the world apart. The driver, a young man with scared eyes, jumped down before the wagon fully stopped. "Ma'am, I ain't never hauled animals like these," he said, wiping sweat from his face. "That black one tried to bite clean through the rope twice. The spotted mare kicked out the back panel. I'm lucky to be alive." Clara walked past him without a word. She moved toward the horses slowly, deliberately, her boots making soft sounds in the dust. The black mare, the largest of the 5, reared back eyes, rolling white teeth bared. Clara stopped. She didn't speak, didn't reach out, just stood there breathing. Ethan watched from the porch, coffee growing cold in his hand. "She's gonna get herself killed," he muttered. Doc Harding sat beside him, pipe between his teeth. "Maybe, maybe not. Watch." The black mare stamped and snorted. Clara still didn't move. 1 minute passed. Then 2. The mare's breathing slowed. Her ears, which had been pinned flat against her skull, began to rotate forward. Clara took 1 step closer. The mare tensed, but didn't rear. Another step. The horse's nostrils flared, taking in her scent. Clara raised her hand palm down and held it steady. The mare stretched her neck forward, lips pulling back, ready to bite. Clara didn't flinch. The mare's lips touched her fingers, soft, curious. Then the horse exhaled a long breath that seemed to release something coiled tight inside her. Clara stroked her neck once, twice, and turned away. "Bring them to the corral," she told the driver. "I'll handle them from here." The young man's jaw dropped. "How'd you do that?" "She's not mean," Clara said. "She's afraid. There's a difference." Ethan set down his coffee and walked toward her. "Where'd you learn that?" "My father." Clara was already untying the first lead rope. "He used to say horses are like people. They fight hardest when they're scared. You don't break fear with force. You break it with patience." "We don't have much time for patience. 24 days now." Clara looked at him. "Then I'll work fast." She led the black mare toward the corral, and the horse followed like a lamb. Doc let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned." Ethan couldn't find words. The morning passed in a blur of dust and sweat. Clara worked with each horse individually, learning their rhythms, their fears, their triggers. The spotted mare spooked at sudden movements. The chestnut hated the sound of metal. The bay resisted any pressure on her left side, an old wound Clara guessed something that had healed wrong. By noon, Ethan had mended 3 fence posts and repaired the water trough. He kept glancing at the corral, watching Clara move among the horses like she'd been born there. "You gonna stand there staring, or you gonna help?" He jumped. Clara was at the fence arms, crossed, sweat streaking through the dust on her face. "I figured you had it handled," he said. "I do. But these horses need to get used to a man's presence. Army riders ain't gonna be women." She jerked her chin toward the corral. "Get in here." Ethan hesitated. "I'm not much good with horses." "I know. That's why you're gonna learn. He climbed over the fence, slowly aware of 5 pairs of eyes tracking his every movement. The black mare Clara called her Shadow pinned her ears back. Slow, Clara said quietly. Don't look at her directly. Predators stare. Prey looks away. Ethan dropped his gaze. Felt foolish doing it, but he did it anyway. Walk toward the bay. Her name's Copper. She's the calmest of the bunch. He walked. Copper shifted but didn't bolt. When he got close enough to touch her, he stopped. Hand out, palm down. Let her come to you. He did. Copper sniffed his fingers, her warm breath tickling his skin. Then she nudged his palm, asking for something. She wants you to scratch her forehead, Clara said. Between the eyes. Go on. Ethan reached up carefully. His fingers found the spot, and Copper leaned into his touch, eyes half closing. Something loosened in his chest. Something he hadn't known was tight. Good, Clara said. You're not hopeless after all. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Don't get cocky. Copper's the easy one. Shadow would have taken your hand off. They worked together through the afternoon. Clara showed him how to read the horse's body language, how to move around them without triggering flight instincts, how to use his voice as a tool instead of a threat. Ethan made mistakes. Shadow nearly kicked him twice. But Clara was patient in ways he hadn't expected, correcting, without condescending teaching, without lecturing. By sunset, he was exhausted in ways he hadn't felt since his ranger days. You did good, Clara said as they walked back toward the house. I nearly got killed 3 times. Only twice. The 3rd time Shadow was bluffing. Ethan laughed. The sound surprised him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed at anything. Clara glanced at him sideways. You should do that more. Do what? Laugh. It suits you better than that frown you wear. Before he could respond, the sound of hoofbeats cut through the evening air. Both of them turned. 3 riders were coming up the road. Even at a distance, Ethan recognized the horse in front. That tall buckskin, groomed and arrogant. Wade Thornton. Clara's hand found Ethan's arm. Her grip was tight, her voice low. That's him, isn't it? Yeah. What do you want to do? Ethan watched the riders approach. Every instinct told him to go for his gun to meet this threat the way he'd met threats for years. But he wasn't a ranger anymore. This wasn't a canyon outside El Paso, and violence wouldn't solve anything here. Stay behind me, he said. Like hell. Clara, I told you about my uncle. I've got as much reason to face him as you do. There was no time to argue. Thornton and his men rode into the yard and stopped. The cattle baron dismounted slowly, brushing dust from his coat, like he had all the time in the world. McAllister, Thornton smiled. I see you've been busy. What do you want, Thornton? Just being neighborly. Those cold eyes moved to Clara. And who might this be? None of your concern. Thornton's smile widened. A mail-order bride. That's what you've come to advertising for a woman like you're selling livestock. He laughed softly. I almost feel sorry for you. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. Say what you came to say and get off my land. Thornton walked closer, boots crunching on dry earth. His men stayed mounted, hands resting near their holsters. I came to make you another offer, final one. I already told you, $600. Thornton cut him off. That's less than before, I know. But the drought's gotten worse. Your cattle are dying. Your land's worth less every day. He shrugged. Take the money, McAllister. Walk away with something instead of nothing. The answer's still no. Thornton's expression didn't change, but something hardened in his eyes. You know I did some asking around about you. Ethan McAllister, former Texas Ranger. Served 8 years, decorated twice, then quit suddenly after an incident in El Paso. He tilted his head. What happened in El Paso, McAllister? The words hit like a bullet. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. Felt the old guilt surge up, hot and suffocating. The canyon, the gunfire, Jake's voice crying out, the blood pooling in the dust. I thought so. Thornton's voice was soft now, almost gentle. A man doesn't run from a career like that without a reason. A man doesn't hide on a failing ranch in the middle of nowhere unless he's got ghosts chasing him. Get out. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. I'm just saying whatever happened, whatever you're running from this ranch ain't gonna save you from it. Nothing will. So why not take the money, start over somewhere else, somewhere those ghosts can't find you? Clara stepped forward. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. Mr. Thornton, isn't it? Thornton turned to her amused. That's right. I know who you are. You bought my uncle's ranch in Wyoming 3 years ago. Henry Sutton. You remember him. Something flickered across Thornton's face. Recognition, then nothing. Can't say I do. No. He shot himself 6 months after you took everything he had. Put a bullet through his own head because men like you don't just take land. You take hope. You take dignity. You take everything that makes a man feel like he's worth something. Clara's voice didn't waver. So when you ask why we won't sell, that's your answer. We know exactly what happens to people who take your money. Silence. Thornton stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. You've got fire, miss. I'll give you that. He turned back to his horse and mounted. But fire don't pay debts. Fire don't buy feed or fix wells or make rainfall. In 23 days, the bank's gonna come calling, and all your fire ain't gonna matter one damn bit. He gathered his reins and looked down at them. When you're ready to be reasonable, you know where to find me. He rode away. His men followed. The dust settled slowly behind them. Clara was shaking. Ethan could see it in her hands, in the set of her shoulders. Clara. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't say anything right now. I just need a minute. She walked toward the barn. Ethan let her go. Doc Harding appeared on the porch, pipe in hand. I heard most of that. You all right? No. He knew about El Paso. Ethan sat down on the porch steps, head in his hands. He's been digging, looking for leverage. What happened there, I've never asked, but my partner died. The words came out flat, empty. Jake Colton. We were tracking a gang of rustlers. I made a call, told him to go left while I went right. Walked him straight into an ambush. Ethan's voice cracked. Took him 3 hours to bleed out. I held him the whole time. Couldn't do nothing but watch. Doc was quiet for a long moment. That why you quit? Couldn't trust myself anymore. Every decision I made, I second-guessed. Every order I gave, I saw Jake's face. Ethan looked up at the dying light. I thought if I came out here, started fresh, maybe I could forget. But Thornton's right. You can't outrun ghosts. Maybe not. Doc sat down beside him. But you don't have to run alone. Ethan looked toward the barn where Clara had disappeared. She shouldn't have come here. I've got nothing to offer her but trouble. Seems to me she can handle trouble just fine. They sat in silence until the stars came out. Then Ethan stood, straightened his shoulders, and walked toward the barn. He found Clara in the hayloft, sitting with her back against a beam, staring at nothing. She didn't look up when he climbed the ladder. I should have told you about El Paso, he said quietly, before Thornton used it against me. Yes, you should have. My partner died because of a decision I made. I've been running from it ever since. Clara was silent for a moment. Then she looked at him. My father died because he wouldn't stop fighting. Worked himself into the ground trying to save a business that was already lost. Some nights I wonder if I should have made him quit, made him see reason. She laughed bitterly. But that wasn't who he was. He died the way he lived, stubborn and proud and fighting till the end. I'm sorry. Don't be. He wouldn't want pity. She pulled her knees up to her chest. You made a bad call, Ethan. It happens. Doesn't make you a coward. Doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Jake's dead because of me. Jake's dead because men with guns decided to kill him. You made a decision with the information you had. You couldn't have known." Her voice softened. "Blaming yourself don't bring him back. It just keeps you from living." Ethan sat down beside her. Not too close, but close enough. "How do you do it? Stay so strong after everything you've lost." Clara was quiet for a long time. "I don't feel strong. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding on, but then I remember what my father used to say." She smiled faintly. "The only way out is through. So I keep going. One day at a time. One problem at a time. Until the going gets easier or the problems run out." "What if the problems never run out?" "Then at least I'll know I didn't quit." They sat together in the darkness, two broken people trying to figure out how to be whole again. The horses moved restlessly below them. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. "We should get some sleep," Clara said finally. "Tomorrow's going to be hard. They're all going to be hard." "Yeah." She stood brushed hay from her dress. "But at least we're not doing it alone." She climbed down the ladder. Ethan stayed a moment longer thinking about Jake, about Thornton, about the woman who'd walked into his broken life and refused to walk back out. Then he followed her into the house. The next 2 weeks passed in a rhythm of sweat and struggle. Clara worked with the horses from dawn until dark, pushing them and herself to the limit. Ethan helped where he could, learning more each day, his hands growing familiar with leads and bridles, and the endless patience required to train animals that didn't want to be trained. The neighbors started coming. Word had spread about the spring, about the only water left in the county, and one by one they arrived. Tom Miller from the South Ranch, Ed Brennan and his 2 sons, old Margaret Hayes, who'd outlived 3 husbands and refused to bury a 4th. Ethan made deals. Water for labor. Water for supplies. Water for loyalty. The fences got fixed. The barn roof got patched. The well got a new pump. Slowly, piece by piece, the ranch started looking less like a graveyard and more like something that might survive. Clara noticed. "You're good at this," she said one evening, watching him shake hands with Ed Brennan over a deal for lumber. "Good at what?" "Building alliances, getting people to work together." She smiled. "That's a skill, Ethan. A valuable one." "I was a ranger for 8 years. You learn to read people." "Then maybe it's time to stop running from what you learned." He thought about that long after she'd gone to bed. Thought about the man he'd been before El Paso. The man who trusted his instincts, who made decisions without drowning in doubt. Maybe that man wasn't gone. Maybe he was just buried under guilt and fear. On the 15th day, everything changed. It started with Shadow. The black mare had been making progress, letting Clara bridle her, accepting a saddle, even tolerating short rides around the corral. She was the best of the 5, the one Clara was counting on to fetch the highest price from the army. Ethan was hauling water when he heard the scream. Not human. Horse. He dropped the bucket and ran. Clara was in the corral, pressed against the fence, her face white. Shadow was down, thrashing in the dust, one leg twisted at an angle that made Ethan's stomach turn. "What happened?" "I don't know. She was fine, and then she spooked at something, a snake maybe I didn't see, and she went down hard." Shadow screamed again, trying to stand, the broken leg folding beneath her. "Don't let her move." Clara ducked through the fence, approaching carefully. "Shadow. Shadow, easy, girl. Easy." The mare's eyes were wild with pain and fear. She snapped at Clara, teeth flashing. "Get Doc," Clara said without looking away. "Now." Ethan ran. Doc Harding arrived within the hour. He examined the leg, while Clara held Shadow's head, murmuring constantly, keeping her as calm as possible. When he straightened up, his face told Ethan everything he needed to know. "It's broken clean through," Doc said quietly. "2 places. I've never seen a horse come back from something like this." "There has to be something," Clara's voice cracked. "She's the best one. She's the one I was counting on. Clara. No. She shook her head fiercely. No, I won't accept that. There has to be a way. Doc looked at Ethan. The unspoken message was clear. This horse needs to be put down. But Ethan remembered what Clara had said about her father, about fighting until the end, about refusing to quit. Is there any chance? He asked Doc. Any chance at all? Doc sighed. If we could splint it right, keep her immobile for weeks, maybe months, there's a slim chance. But the pain would be constant. The risk of infection is high, and even if she healed, she'd never be a cavalry horse, never be worth what you need her to be worth. Clara's shoulders shook. She buried her face in Shadow's mane, holding the horse she'd raised from a foal, the horse that had trusted her when no one else could get close. I can't lose her, she whispered. I can't. Ethan knelt beside her. What do you want to do? I want to try. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. I know it's foolish. I know we need the money, and she's worth nothing now. But I can't just give up on her. I can't. He should have argued. Should have told her they couldn't afford sentiment. Should have reminded her about the deadline, the bank, everything they stood to lose. Instead, he said, Then we try. Doc shook his head, but pulled out his bag. I'll do what I can. No promises. They worked through the night, splinted the leg with boards and cloth, gave Shadow herbs for the pain, built a makeshift sling to keep weight off the broken limb. By dawn, the mare was stable but exhausted, eyes dull with pain and shock. Clara sat beside her, refusing to leave. You should sleep, Ethan said. I can't. Clara. This is my fault. Her voice was hollow. I pushed too hard, moved too fast. If I'd been more careful. Stop. He knelt beside her, took her hands in his. They were cold, trembling. This wasn't your fault. Accidents happen. Horses spook. You couldn't have known. We've lost her, Ethan. Even if she lives, we've lost our best chance at the money. Then we figure out another way. How? We've got 4 horses left, and none of them are ready. We've got 9 days until the army's deadline. It's not enough time. Ethan looked at her, this fierce, broken woman who'd given everything she had to a fight that wasn't even hers. It has to be enough, he said. Because we're not quitting. Clara stared at him. Something shifted in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or gratitude, or something deeper that neither of them had words for yet. Okay, she whispered. Okay. She leaned against him just slightly. He put his arm around her shoulders. It was the first time they'd touched like this, not by accident, not in passing, but deliberately. They stayed like that until the sun came up. Shadow was still alive. And so was hope. 9 days became 8. 8 became 7. Clara stopped sleeping. She divided her hours between Shadow's makeshift stall and the training corral, moving between them like a woman possessed. The other 4 horses, Copper, the spotted mare called Dusty, the chestnut named Ember, and the bay they called Whiskey, needed to be ready. All of them. Every single one had to pass army inspection or the numbers wouldn't work. Ethan found her at midnight, still working Ember in the corral by lantern light. Clara, stop. Can't stop. She didn't look at him. Ember's still fighting the bit. She won't take commands from anyone but me. You're going to collapse. Then I'll collapse after August 10th. He climbed over the fence and caught the horse's lead, pulling Ember to a halt. Clara spun on him, eyes blazing. What are you doing? Saving you from yourself. He held firm as she tried to grab the rope back. You've been going for 3 days straight. You can barely stand. How are you supposed to train horses when you can't even see straight? I can see fine. You missed the water trough twice today, nearly walked into the fence. Doc said he found you talking to Shadow about your father for 20 minutes, except Shadow was asleep. Clara's face crumpled, just for a moment, just a crack in the armor before she rebuilt it. I don't have time to fall apart, Ethan. I'm not asking you to fall apart. I'm asking you to sleep. 4 hours, that's all. 4 hours is 4 hours I don't have. 4 hours is the difference between training horses and burying them. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Clara, please, let me help. She stared at him. The fight drained out of her slowly, like water through cracked earth. You can't do what I do. No. But I can watch Shadow tonight. I can make sure the horses are fed and watered. I can do everything that doesn't require your particular skill, so that when you wake up, you can focus on what only you can do. Her shoulders sagged. You'd do that? I'd do more than that if you'd let me. Something passed between them, something neither of them named. Clara handed him Ember's lead without another word. 4 hours, she said. 4 hours. She walked toward the house. Halfway there, she stopped and looked back. Ethan? Yeah? Thank you. She disappeared inside. Ethan stood alone in the corral holding a horse that didn't trust him, wondering when exactly Clara Sutton had become the most important thing in his life. The answer, he realized, was probably the moment she'd refused to let him carry her trunk. Morning brought trouble. Ethan woke to shouting. He grabbed his rifle and ran outside to find Tom Miller standing in the yard, face red with fury, 3 of his ranch hands behind him. They damned the creek, Tom was yelling. Thornton's men. Built a wall of rocks and timber overnight. Ain't nothing coming through. The spring still runs on my land, Ethan said. You can still... For how long? Tom's voice cracked. He's choking us out, McAllister. One by one. Ed Brennan's talking about selling. Says he can't watch his cattle die no more. Clara appeared on the porch, hair still mussed from sleep, but her eyes sharp. What's happening? Thornton's making his move. Ethan's jaw tightened. Cutting off water to the other ranches. Trying to force everyone to sell. Can he do that legally? Creek runs through his land before it reaches anyone else's. Legally, he can do whatever he wants with it. Tom spat in the dust. Law don't mean nothing when a man like that controls the water. We're dead, McAllister. All of us. No. Clara came down the steps, moving past Ethan to face Tom directly. How many cattle you got left? 60 head, maybe less. Bring them here. All of them. Today. Tom blinked. What? The spring on this land can support more than what we've got. It won't be comfortable, but it'll keep them alive. Bring your cattle. Tell Ed Brennan to bring his. Tell anyone who hasn't sold to Thornton yet. Clara, Ethan started. We pool resources. She continued, ignoring him. Your cattle drink our water. Your hands help with the work. We survive together, or we die apart. Tom looked at Ethan. She always liked this. Getting that impression, Ethan said. You serious about this? Opening your land to everyone. I'm serious about not letting Thornton win. Clara's voice hardened. My uncle gave up. My father gave up. I'm done watching good people lose because one man has more money and less conscience. So yes, Mr. Miller. Bring your cattle. Bring your family. Bring anyone who's willing to fight. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right. I'll spread the word. But McAllister. He looked at Ethan. You better be ready for what comes next. Thornton ain't gonna take this lying down. Let him come, Ethan said. We'll be ready. Tom rode off with his men. Clara watched them go, arms crossed, jaw set. You just invited every struggling rancher in the county to use our water, Ethan said quietly. I know. Water we were counting on to last until the rains come. I know. Clara. She turned to face him. What was I supposed to do? Let them die. Let Thornton pick us off one by one until there's no one left to stand against him. I'm not saying you were wrong. I'm saying we need to think about what happens when. When what? When we run out of water. When the spring goes dry. Clara's voice rose. We were already on borrowed time, Ethan. At least this way we're not alone. He wanted to argue. wanted to point out all the ways this could go wrong. But she was right, and he knew it. Alone, they were easy targets. Together, they might stand a chance. "All right," he said. "Then we better figure out how to make this work." Clara exhaled. Some of the tension left her shoulders. "The army deadline is in 6 days. If we can get those horses sold, we'll have money for feed, for supplies, for whatever we need to hold out until the drought breaks. And if the drought doesn't break, then we figure that out too." She looked at him steadily. "One problem at a time, remember." By afternoon, the ranch had transformed. Cattle arrived in waves. Tom Miller's 60 head, then Ed Brennan's 45, then smaller herds from 3 other families. The spring ran clear but thin, barely enough to keep them all drinking, but enough. For now. Clara returned to the horses. Ethan worked with the ranchers to organize grazing rotations, water schedules, guard shifts. Doc Harding moved between groups, treating dehydrated animals and exhausted men with equal efficiency. For 2 days, it almost felt like they might make it. Then Thornton came back. He rode in at sunset on the 3rd day, but this time he wasn't alone. 20 men flanked him, armed and hard-eyed. They spread out across the property line like a wall of flesh and iron. Clara was in the corral with Dusty when she saw them. Her blood ran cold. "Ethan!" He was already moving, rifle in hand. Tom Miller and Ed Brennan falling in beside him. The other ranchers gathered behind them, a ragged line of desperate men facing down Thornton's private army. Thornton dismounted slowly, that cold smile fixed on his face. "Well, well, looks like you've been busy, McAllister." "Get off my land, Thornton. Now that's not very neighborly." Thornton walked forward, hands spread in mock innocence. "I just came to talk. See, I've been hearing some troubling things. Heard you've been taking in cattle from all over the county. Heard you've been giving away water that ain't yours to give. The spring's on my land. I can do what I want with it. For now." Thornton's smile widened. "But the bank owns this place in 3 days, and when they foreclose, this land becomes mine. Along with the spring. Along with everything." Clara pushed through the crowd to stand beside Ethan. "You don't own anything yet. Miss Sutton." Thornton's eyes traveled over her slowly. "I've been thinking about our last conversation. About your Uncle Henry. Fine man, as I recall. Shame what happened to him." "Don't you dare speak his name. I'm just pointing out a pattern." Thornton's voice dropped soft and dangerous. "People who fight me tend to lose more than land. They lose hope. They lose family. Some of them lose their lives." He shrugged. "I'm not threatening anyone, mind you. Just observing." Ethan stepped forward, placing himself between Clara and Thornton. "You've said your piece. Now leave." "I'll leave when I'm ready." Thornton looked past him to the gathered ranchers. "Listen to me, all of you. This man is going to lose his ranch. That's not a threat, it's arithmetic. He owes $800 in 3 days, and all the horses and hope in the world won't change that. When it happens, I'll own this land this spring, everything. And then," he smiled, "then we'll discuss terms for water access. Very different terms than what you're getting now." Ed Brennan's face went pale. Tom Miller's hand drifted toward his gun. "Anyone who wants to sell to me now," Thornton continued, "I'll make sure you're taken care of. Good prices, fair treatment, my word on it." His gaze swept the crowd. "But anyone who stands against me," the smile disappeared. "There won't be enough water in Montana to save you." Silence, heavy and thick, pressing down on all of them. Then Clara spoke. "You want to know what I learned from my uncle's death, Mr. Thornton?" Every eye turned to her. Thornton raised an eyebrow, amused. "I learned that men like you count on fear." Clara's voice was steady, clear, carrying across the yard. "You count on people being too scared to fight back, too tired to stand up, too broken to believe they can win." She walked forward past Ethan, stopping directly in front of Thornton. "But here's the thing about breaking people. Sometimes when you push them far enough, they stop breaking. They start fighting. Is that so? Look around you. Clara gestured to the ranchers, the families, the desperate faces gathered on Ethan's land. These people have nothing left to lose. You've taken their water. You've taken their neighbors. You've taken everything but their will to survive. And now you come here threatening to take that too. She shook her head. You've miscalculated, Mr. Thornton. Badly. Thornton's smile flickered. Just for a moment. Just enough. Pretty words, he said quietly. But words don't pay debts. No. But horses do. Clara held his gaze. And in 3 days, I'm going to sell 4 perfectly trained cavalry mounts to the United States Army. Then I'm going to come back here and pay off every cent Ethan McAllister owes. And when I do, you're going to watch your little empire stop growing. She leaned closer. Forever. The silence stretched. Thornton's jaw tightened. Behind him, his men shifted uneasily. Then Thornton laughed, low and dangerous. 3 days is a long time, Miss Sutton. A lot can happen in 3 days. He mounted his horse and turned. His men fell in behind him. I'll see you soon, he called back. All of you. They rode away. The dust settled. Clara stood frozen in place, hands shaking at her sides. Ethan came up beside her. Clara, I'm fine. You're shaking. I said I'm fine. She turned and walked toward the barn, movement's jerky breath coming too fast. Ethan followed. Inside, away from the others, she collapsed against a beam, sliding down until she sat in the hay knees, drawn up, face hidden. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't. Ethan knelt beside her. You just did. You stared down Wade Thornton and didn't blink. I was bluffing. I'm always bluffing. Her voice cracked. The horses aren't ready. Dusty still won't take a rider. Ember fights every command. Whiskey spooked at a shadow yesterday and nearly trampled me. She looked up, eyes wet. I told him I could train them in 3 days, but I can't. I don't have enough time. Then we make time. How? There aren't enough hours in the day, Ethan. I've been pushing as hard as I can, and it's not enough. It's never enough. He sat down beside her, shoulder to shoulder, close enough that she could feel his warmth. Tell me what you need. A miracle. Fresh out of those. What else? She almost laughed. Almost. Help. Real help, not just hauling water and mending fences. Someone who can work with the horses while I focus on the ones that need the most attention. Then teach me. Clara looked at him. You can barely ride. I can learn. You said yourself I'm not hopeless. Ethan? 3 days. He held her gaze. You teach me what I need to know, and I'll work those horses until my hands bleed. You focus on Dusty and Ember. I'll work with Copper and Whiskey. Between the 2 of us, we get them ready. And if we fail, then we fail together. But we don't quit. That's what you told me, remember? Clara stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. Okay. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. We start now. Get Copper saddled. I'll show you the basics, and then we work until we drop. They worked through the night. Clara taught Ethan everything she knew: how to read a horse's mood through its ears and tail, how to apply pressure and release at exactly the right moments, how to use voice commands that the army required. He learned faster than she'd expected, his ranger instincts translating into a kind of intuitive understanding of behavior and response. By dawn, Copper was responding to basic commands from him. By noon, she was accepting the unfamiliar weight of a cavalry saddle. Good, Clara said, watching them circle the corral. Now faster. The army wants horses that can change pace on command. Ethan clicked his tongue. Copper accelerated smoothly. Stop. She stopped. Turn left. Tight turn. She turned, hooves dancing, ears forward. Clara felt something ease in her chest. She's ready. Ethan grinned, the first real smile she'd seen from him since this all began. 1 down. 3 to go. They moved to Whiskey. The bay was more skittish, less trusting, but Ethan approached her the same way Clara had shown him, slowly, patiently, never forcing what the horse wasn't ready to give. Hours passed. The sun crawled across the sky. Doc Harding brought them food which they ate standing up, never leaving the corral. The other ranchers came to watch, silent witnesses to the desperate effort. By nightfall of the first day, Whiskey was responding. Not perfectly, but well enough. 2 down, Clara said, exhaustion thick in her voice. We rest for 3 hours, then start on Dusty. 3 hours. That's all we can spare. They slept in the barn side by side in the hay, close enough that their shoulders touched. Clara woke once in the darkness to find Ethan's hand resting near hers, fingers almost but not quite intertwined. She didn't move away. The second day was harder. Dusty lived up to her name, stubborn, willful, determined to do everything her own way. Clara worked with her for 6 straight hours, making progress measured in inches rather than feet. The mare would accept the saddle one moment and try to buck it off the next. She'd follow commands from Clara, but ignored Ethan completely. She needs to respond to a man's voice, Clara said, frustration bleeding through. The army riders won't be women. I'm trying. Try harder. Clara. I said try harder. She regretted the words instantly. Ethan's face went blank, shuddering the hurt she'd put there. I'm sorry. She pressed her hands to her temples. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... You're exhausted, he said quietly. We both are. That's not an excuse. No, but it's a reason. He walked to her, stopped close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. We're going to make it, Clara. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but we're going to make it. How can you be so sure? Because I've been in impossible situations before. Outnumbered, outgunned, no way out. His hand found hers, rough calluses against her work-worn skin. And the only thing that got me through was believing I could. So that's what I'm choosing. Belief. Clara looked at their joined hands, looked at this man who'd started as a stranger, then became a partner, and was now something else entirely. Something she didn't have words for. I'm scared, she admitted. The words came out small, vulnerable. I've never been this scared in my life. I know. He squeezed her hand. Me too. You don't seem scared. That's because I learned a long time ago that fear and courage look the same from the outside. It's what you do that matters, not what you feel. She held on to that, held on to him. Let the moment stretch until the fear receded just enough to breathe. All right, she said finally. Let's get back to work. They returned to Dusty. This time, Ethan tried something different. Instead of commanding, he asked. Instead of pushing, he waited. He talked to the mare the way Clara had taught him, not as a master to a servant, but as one creature to another. Slowly, impossibly, Dusty began to listen. By the end of the second day, she was responding to his voice. 3 down, Clara breathed. 1 to go. But Ember was the hardest of all. The chestnut mare had trust issues that went deeper than training could easily fix. Something had hurt her once. A cruel owner, a bad accident Clara didn't know, but the damage showed in every flinch, every flash of white-rimmed eyes, every moment she shied away from human hands. I don't know if we can do this, Clara said as dawn broke on the third day. She's too damaged. You said the same thing about Shadow. Shadow was different. Shadow just needed patience. Maybe Ember does too. We don't have time for patience. We have 12 hours. Ethan watched Ember pace the far side of the corral, watching them with wary eyes. What broke her? I don't know. Then we find out. He climbed over the fence, moving slowly, making no sudden movements. Ember snorted and backed away. Easy, girl, easy. He sat down in the dust, cross-legged hands resting on his knees. He didn't move toward her, didn't try to catch her, just sat there, breathing, waiting. Minutes passed. Clara watched from the fence, her heart pounding. Ember paced. Stopped. Paced again. Then slowly she took a step toward Ethan. Then another. She stopped 3 feet away, nostrils flaring, every muscle tensed to flee. "That's it," Ethan said softly. "That's a girl. Nobody's going to hurt you here." Ember's ears rotated forward. She stretched her neck, sniffing the air around him. "I know what it's like," Ethan continued, voice barely above a whisper. "Being hurt so bad you can't trust anyone. Running from everything because staying still feels like dying." He held out his hand, palm up, not reaching, just offering. "But sometimes you find people worth trusting. Sometimes you find a place worth staying." Ember's lips touched his palm, soft, tentative. She didn't pull away. Clara's eyes burned. She wiped them quickly, refusing to cry. Not now, not when they were so close. By noon, Ember was accepting the saddle. By afternoon, she was responding to commands. Not perfectly, her training was rougher than the others. More hesitant, but enough. Enough to pass inspection. Enough to sell. 4 horses. Ready. Clara stood in the corral as the sun began its descent, surrounded by the animals that might save everything. Copper steady and calm. Whiskey quick and responsive. Dusty stubborn but capable. Ember scarred but trusting. Ethan came to stand beside her. "We did it," she said. The words felt unreal. "We actually did it." "We leave at dawn," Ethan said. "Army camp's 3 days' ride. We'll make the deadline with hours to spare." Clara nodded. Then she turned to face him. "Ethan." "Yeah. Thank you. For everything. For believing when I couldn't. For staying when it would have been easier to walk away." She swallowed hard. "I know this started as a lie. The ad, the letters, all of it. But what we have now?" She took a breath. "This feels true." Ethan looked at her. Something shifted in his eyes. Something warm and wondering and afraid all at once. "Clara, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." But he stepped closer. Close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the lines of exhaustion and hope carved into his face. "I was dead when you got here," he said quietly. "Walking around working, breathing, but dead inside. You changed that. You gave me something worth fighting for." He hesitated, then continued. "I don't know what this is between us. I don't know what to call it, but I know I don't want it to end when the debt's paid." Clara's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Neither do I." They stood there close enough to touch the unspoken thing between them, finally given words. Neither moved to close the distance, not yet, but something had changed. Something fundamental. Then Doc's voice shattered the moment. "Ethan, Clara, come quick." They ran. Doc was kneeling beside Shadow's stall, face grim. The black mare was down again, breathing, labored eyes glazed with pain. What happened? Clara dropped to her knees beside the horse she'd fought so hard to save. The splint slipped. She tried to stand and made it worse. Doc shook his head slowly. "I'm sorry, Clara. There's nothing more I can do." Shadow's breath came in ragged gasps. Her beautiful dark coat was matted with sweat, her body trembling with agony. Clara's hand found the mare's neck, stroking gently. "Hey, girl. Hey. I'm here." Shadow's eyes found hers. Even through the pain, there was recognition there. Trust. "You've been so brave," Clara whispered. "So brave. And I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." Ethan knelt beside her. His hand covered hers on Shadow's neck. "I can do it," he said quietly. "You don't have to watch." Clara shook her head. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was steady. "No, she trusted me. I won't leave her now." Doc handed her the pistol. Clara took it with trembling hands. Looked at Shadow one last time. saw her father in that dark eye, saw every loss and every fight and every moment she'd refused to give up. "I love you," she whispered. "Go find my father. Tell him I'm still fighting." She pulled the trigger. The sound echoed across the ranch. Then silence. Clara sat in the dust beside Shadow's body gun, hanging loose in her hand, empty. The other horses shifted nervously. The ranch hands bowed their heads. Ethan pulled Clara against him, holding her while she sobbed, while the grief poured out of her in waves. He didn't speak, didn't try to comfort, just held her steady and sure, while the world fell apart and slowly came back together. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes were red but dry. Something had hardened in them, something that looked like steel. "We leave at dawn," she said, "and we don't come back until we've saved this ranch." Ethan nodded. "We don't come back until we've saved it." They buried Shadow by moonlight. Then they went to prepare for the journey that would decide everything. They rode out before the sun cleared the horizon. Clara led the way on Copper, the steadiest of the 4 horses. Ethan followed on his own mount, keeping watch on Dusty and Ember as they trailed behind on long leads. Whiskey brought up the rear, tied to Ethan's saddle horn, moving with the easy grace of an animal finally at peace with her purpose. Nobody spoke. The weight of everything Shadow's death, the deadline, the impossible odds, pressed down on them like a physical force. Tom Miller had wanted to send men with them. Ethan refused. "Every hand stays here," he'd said. "Thornton knows we're leaving. He might make a move on the ranch while we're gone. You protect what we've built." Tom hadn't argued, just clasped Ethan's hand and said, "Bring that money back. We're all counting on you." Now 3 hours into the journey, those words echoed in Ethan's mind. "We're all counting on you." The same words Jake had said right before Ethan sent him into that canyon, right before everything went wrong. "You're thinking too loud." He looked up. Clara had slowed her horse to ride beside him. "I can practically hear it," she continued. "Whatever's going on in your head, let it go. We need you present." "I am present." "No, you're back in El Paso." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I can see it in your eyes, that faraway look like you're watching something only you can see." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I'm fine." "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and touched his arm just briefly, just enough to bring him back. "This isn't El Paso," she said. "And I'm not Jake. Whatever happens today, you're not alone in it." He looked at her. At this woman who'd buried her horse 12 hours ago and was still riding forward. Who'd lost everything and kept fighting. Who saw through him in ways that should have been terrifying, but somehow weren't. "How do you do it?" he asked. "Do what?" "Keep going. After everything you've lost." Clara considered the question. "My father used to say that grief is just love with nowhere to go. When he died, I thought the grief would kill me. But then I realized it wasn't killing me. It was changing me, making me stronger, harder, more determined." She paused. "Shadow's death hurts. It'll hurt for a long time. But I'm not going to let that hurt stop me from saving what's left. And if we fail, then we fail having tried." She looked at him steadily. "But we're not going to fail, Ethan. Not today." He wanted to believe her, wanted to hold on to that certainty the way a drowning man holds on to driftwood. Before he could respond, Copper's ears flattened. Clara's hand went to her rifle. "Something's wrong." Ethan scanned the terrain. They'd been following a narrow trail through a series of low hills, exposed but necessary, the only route to the army camp that their horses could manage. He'd been watching for trouble since they left, but the land had been quiet. Too quiet, he realized now. "Where are the birds?" he asked softly. Clara went pale. "I don't hear any." The attack came fast. Riders burst from behind the hills on both sides. 6 men with faces covered by bandanas, guns already drawn. They moved with the precision of professionals flanking the trail, cutting off retreat and advance in a single coordinated motion. "Don't move." The lead rider pointed his pistol directly at Ethan's chest. "Hands where I can see them." Ethan's instincts screamed at him to draw, to fight, to do something. But Clara was exposed, the horses were vulnerable, and 6 guns were aimed at their heads. He raised his hands. "Smart choice." The lead rider moved closer, his horse dancing nervously. "Now we're going to make this real simple. You hand over those horses, and nobody gets hurt." "These horses aren't for sale." "Who said anything about buying?" The man laughed. "Mr. Thornton sends his regards. He wanted you to know this is what happens when you don't take a fair deal." Clara's voice cut through the tension. "Thornton sent you to steal from us. That's low even for him." "Ain't stealing if you're dead." The leader's eyes crinkled with amusement above his bandana. "Way I hear it, you two got caught by bandits on the road. Tragic accident. Happens all the time out here." Ethan's blood ran cold. Not robbery. Murder. "Thornton won't get away with this," he said. "Thornton gets away with everything. That's the whole point." The leader raised his gun. "Any last words?" Time slowed. Ethan saw Clara's hand moving toward her rifle, too slow, too obvious. Saw the other gunman's fingers tightening on triggers. Saw death coming for both of them with the inevitability of a sunset. And then something happened. Something he hadn't felt in 2 years. The ranger in him woke up. He didn't think, didn't plan, just moved. His hand found the knife at his belt in a motion so practiced it was nearly invisible. The blade left his fingers before the leader could react, spinning through the air and burying itself in the man's shoulder. The leader screamed. His gun fired wild, the bullet singing past Ethan's ear. Ethan was already moving. He threw himself from his horse, hitting the ground, rolling, coming up with his rifle as chaos erupted around him. Clara ducked low over Copper's neck as gunfire cracked through the air. She kicked the mare forward, scattering 2 of the gunman's horses with the sudden charge. Ethan fired. Once. Twice. A gunman toppled from his saddle. Another clutched his arm and wheeled away. "Clara, go!" She didn't hesitate. She grabbed Dusty and Ember's leads and spurred Copper forward, the horses breaking into a gallop. Ethan covered her retreat. He fired again, forcing the remaining gunmen to seek cover. The wounded leader was screaming orders, but his men were panicking, their ambush collapsing into disarray. One of them raised his rifle, aiming at Clara's retreating back. Ethan shot him through the shoulder before he could pull the trigger. Then he was running, sprinting for his horse, swinging into the saddle with a motion burned into his muscles by years of practice. "After them!" The leader's voice was ragged with pain. "Don't let them!" Ethan didn't wait to hear the rest. He kicked his horse into a flat-out run, Whiskey's lead line pulling tight as the bay mare raced to keep up. Behind him, gunfire continued, but the shots were wild now, desperate. The ambush had failed. The killers were wounded, disorganized, left behind by speed and luck, and 2 years of skills Ethan thought he'd buried. He caught up to Clara half a mile down the trail. She'd slowed enough to keep the horses from stumbling, her face white with fear and adrenaline. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "No. No." They didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The gunmen might regroup. Might have reinforcements waiting. Might do anything, because Thornton clearly had no limits anymore. They rode hard for an hour, pushing the horses as much as they dared, putting distance between themselves and the ambush site. Finally, when the animals began to lather and stumble, Ethan called a halt. "We need to rest them," he said, sliding from the saddle. "Just for a few minutes." Clara dismounted more slowly. Her hands were shaking. "That was..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Yeah. They were going to kill us, murder us, and make it look like bandits." "I know. Thornton is insane. Thornton is desperate." Ethan checked the horses, running his hands over their legs, looking for injuries. "We threatened his empire. Men like him can't stand that. They'd rather burn everything down than watch someone else win." Clara sat down on a rock, pressing her palms to her eyes. "How did you do that?" Do what? Move like that. Fight like that. 1 second you were raising your hands, the next second you had a knife in someone's shoulder and were shooting 3 men at once. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He finished checking whiskey, then walked over to where Clara sat. I was a Texas Ranger for 8 years, he said quietly. Before El Paso. Before I started running from myself. I've been in more gunfights than I can count. Tracked killers through desert and mountain and everything in between. He paused. When you're a ranger long enough, the training becomes instinct. It doesn't leave you just because you stop wearing the badge. Clara looked up at him. You saved my life. You saved yourself. That charge you made scattering their horses, that's what broke the ambush. I just finished what you started. We make a good team. The words hung between them. Ethan reached down, offering his hand. Clara took it and let him pull her to her feet. They stood close, closer than necessary. Her hand was still in his, warm and steady, despite the trembling he'd seen earlier. When this is over, Ethan said slowly, when the ranch is saved, and Thornton is beaten, and we can finally breathe, I want to court you properly. Clara blinked. What? I know this started wrong. The ad, the lies, all of it. But what we have now, it's real. And I don't want it to end when the crisis does. He swallowed hard. I want to know what we could be when we're not fighting to survive. Clara stared at him. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then she laughed. A real laugh, warm and genuine, cutting through the tension of the past hour, like sunlight through clouds. Ethan McAllister, she said. We just survived a murder attempt. We're standing in the middle of nowhere with stolen horses and a deadline that might kill us. And you choose now to tell me you want to court me. Seemed as good a time as any. It's a terrible time. Probably. She stepped closer, so close he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Ask me again when we're not covered in dust and gunpowder. Ask me when we've saved the ranch and buried Thornton's ambitions. Ask me when we have time to actually figure out what this is. Her voice softened. But yes. The answer is yes. Relief flooded through him. He hadn't realized how afraid he'd been until that fear dissolved. We should keep moving, Clara said, stepping back, her cheeks flushed. The army camp is still 2 days away. 1.5 if we push. Then we push. They mounted up and rode on. The second day tested them harder than the first. The horses were tired, the humans more so. Every sound made Clara flinch. Every distant cloud of dust made Ethan reach for his rifle. They moved quickly but carefully, avoiding the main trails, taking longer routes through terrain that would hide their tracks. At nightfall, they made a cold camp in a narrow ravine, unwilling to risk a fire that might give away their position. Do you think they followed us? Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know. Maybe. Thornton won't give up. No, he won't. They sat back to back, keeping watch in both directions. The horses dozed nearby, too tired to be nervous anymore. Tell me about Jake, Clara said suddenly. Ethan tensed. Why? Because you never talk about him. And because I think keeping it inside is killing you slower than anything Thornton could do. The silence stretched. Ethan stared into the darkness, feeling the old wound pulse beneath his ribs. He was my partner for 4 years, he said finally. Best tracker I ever knew. Could follow a trail through solid rock if you gave him enough time. He had a wife back in Austin, 2 little girls. He used to show me their drawings every time he got a letter. Clara waited. The rustlers we were chasing, they'd killed 6 ranchers, burned whole families out of their homes. We tracked them to a canyon south of El Paso. I thought they'd gone left into the high ground. I was wrong. His voice cracked. He kept going. I sent Jake left. Told him I'd take the right fork and we'd catch them in a crossfire. But they hadn't gone left. They were waiting. All of them. Ethan closed his eyes. I heard the gunshots from half a mile away. By the time I got there, Jake was bleeding out in the dirt. He'd taken 4 bullets trying to hold them off alone. Ethan. I held him for 3 hours while he died. He kept asking about his girls, kept telling me to make sure they knew he loved them. Ethan's voice broke completely. He didn't blame me. That was the worst part. He should have blamed me. It was my call, my mistake, my fault. But he just kept saying it wasn't, kept saying he'd have made the same decision. Clara turned, wrapping her arms around him from behind, holding him, while the tears he'd held back for 2 years finally came. "He forgave you," she said softly. "The question is, when are you going to forgive yourself?" "I don't know how." "Then we figure it out together. After this is over. After we've won." He leaned into her embrace, letting himself be held, letting the grief flow through him instead of around him. For the first time since El Paso, the weight on his chest felt slightly lighter. They stayed like that until dawn began to gray the horizon. Then they rode on. The army camp appeared at midday, on the third day, sprawling across a wide valley, like a small town made of canvas and wood. Hundreds of soldiers moved between tents. Horses milled in corralled areas. The American flag snapped in the hot wind. Clara's heart was pounding as they approached the gate. This was it. Everything they'd worked for, everything they'd suffered came down to the next few hours. A sergeant stopped them at the entrance. "State your business." "We're here to sell horses," Clara said. "Cavalry mounts. We heard the army was buying." The sergeant looked over the 4 animals trailing behind them. "You heard right. Captain Morrison handles purchasing. I'll take you to him." They were escorted through the camp, drawing curious stares from soldiers who weren't used to seeing a woman leading a string of horses. Clara kept her head high, meeting every gaze, refusing to be intimidated. Captain Morrison was a lean man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper mustache. He sat behind a makeshift desk in a command tent, papers scattered around him. "I'm told you have horses to sell." 4 cavalry mounts," Clara said. "Trained to standard army specifications. Ready to ride." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "Trained by whom?" "By me." "A woman." "Is that a problem, Captain?" Morrison studied her for a long moment. Then unexpectedly he smiled. "My grandmother broke horses on the Texas frontier for 40 years. Best rider I ever knew. So no ma'am, it's not a problem." He stood. "Let's see what you've brought." They walked out to where the horses were tied. Morrison examined each one carefully, checking teeth, hooves, legs, looking for any sign of weakness or poor conditioning. He watched Clara put Copper through basic commands, then Dusty, then Whiskey. His expression remained neutral throughout. "What about that one?" He pointed to Ember. Clara hesitated. Ember was the weakest of the 4, the least trained, the most likely to fail inspection. "She's still young. Her training is—" "Let me see her." Clara had no choice. She untied Ember and led her forward. The chestnut mare was nervous, ears flicking at every unfamiliar sound. Clara murmured to her, keeping her calm, but she could feel the animal's tension through the lead rope. "She's skittish," Morrison observed. "She had a difficult past, but she responds well now. Watch." Clara ran through the basic commands. Ember performed them, but reluctantly, her movements jerky with anxiety. Morrison watched in silence. When Clara finished, he walked around the mare, examining her from all angles. "What happened to this horse?" he asked finally. "I don't know exactly. She came to me damaged, but she's healing. She's not ready for combat." Clara's heart sank. "Captain." "The other 3 are excellent, some of the best trained mounts I've seen in months." Morrison turned to face her. "I'll give you $600 for them." "600. Not 800. Not enough." "Captain Morrison, please. I have 4 horses, not 3. Ember can serve—" "She can't." His voice was firm, but not unkind. "A cavalry horse that panics under pressure gets soldiers killed. I won't put men at risk for a mount that isn't ready." Clara looked at Ember, at the horse who'd finally learned to trust, at the animal that represented the difference between saving the ranch and losing everything. "We need $800, she said quietly. "The ranch depends on it. People depend on it. Morrison's expression softened slightly. I understand. But I can't pay for a horse I can't use. I'm sorry. Clara felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. They'd come so far, fought so hard, and now because of one damaged horse, it was all going to fall apart. Ethan stepped forward. Captain, if I may. Morrison turned. And you are? Ethan McAllister, former Texas Ranger. Something shifted in Morrison's eyes. McAllister served under Captain Harris out of El Paso. Yes, sir. I know your reputation. Good man from what I heard. Morrison's gaze sharpened. Also heard you quit under unusual circumstances. I made a mistake that cost someone his life. I've been trying to make peace with that ever since. Morrison nodded slowly. Takes courage to admit that. What did you want to say about the horse? Ethan moved to stand beside Ember. The mare's ears flattened, but she didn't shy away. This horse was broken by someone who didn't understand her, hurt by someone who should have protected her. She learned that humans mean pain, so she flinches at every hand, every sound, every shadow. Ethan stroked her neck gently. But she's learning to trust again. Learning that not everyone is going to hurt her. He looked at Morrison. Captain, I know she's not perfect. I know she's scared. But she's also brave. She ran through gunfire 2 days ago when Thornton's men ambushed us. She didn't bolt, didn't panic, didn't throw her rider. She ran because Clara asked her to, because she trusted Clara more than she feared the guns. Morrison was listening intently. The army doesn't just need horses that follow orders, Ethan continued. It needs horses with heart, horses that will carry a soldier through hell and back, because they believe in the person on their back. Ember has that. She just needs time to show it. Silence. Morrison looked at Ember, at Clara, at Ethan. Then he walked forward and extended his hand. Ember flinched, then slowly stretched her neck to sniff his fingers. Easy, girl, Morrison murmured. I'm not going to hurt you. Ember's nostrils flared. Her ears rotated forward. And then, impossibly, she nudged Morrison's palm. The captain smiled. $700, he said. For all four. That's my final offer. Clara's heart sank. Still not enough. Captain, I'm also authorized to offer contracts for future purchases, Morrison continued. The Army needs good horses, and good trainers are hard to find. If you can provide mounts of this quality on a regular basis, I'll guarantee $200 per horse with orders placed quarterly. Clara's breath caught. Quarterly orders. Minimum of 10 horses per quarter. That's $2,000 guaranteed 4 times a year. More, if you can provide more. $8,000 a year. Enough to save the ranch, enough to rebuild, enough to create something that would last. We accept, Clara said. Morrison nodded. I'll have the paperwork drawn up. You can collect your $700 this afternoon. He walked away, leaving them standing beside the 4 horses that had just saved everything. Clara turned to Ethan. We did it. You did it. I just talked. You talked the captain into buying a horse he'd already rejected. That's not nothing. Ethan smiled. A real smile reaching his eyes. I learned from the best. They stood together in the army camp, the afternoon sun beating down on them, the weight of the past weeks finally beginning to lift. $700 now, and contracts worth thousands more. The ranch was saved. But as Clara looked back toward the horizon toward home, a new worry crept into her heart. They'd been gone for 3 days. 3 days with Thornton knowing they were vulnerable. 3 days for him to make his move. We need to get back, she said quietly. Ethan followed her gaze. His smile faded. You're thinking about the ranch. I'm thinking about what Thornton might do while we're gone. He sent men to kill us, Ethan, men who were supposed to make it look like an accident. If he's that desperate, what's he willing to do to the people we left behind? The celebration drained out of both of them. We leave as soon as we have the money, Ethan said. We leave before that. Take the contract papers as proof. Get the cash later." They moved quickly, finding Morrison explaining the urgency. The captain understood he'd dealt with men like Thornton before and agreed to send the payment to Copper Creek's bank within the week. Within an hour, they were riding hard toward home, the signed contracts safely tucked in Clara's saddlebag. $700 coming. Thousands more promised. The future they'd fought for was finally real. But first, they had to survive getting home. And Thornton was still out there. They smelled the smoke before they saw it. Clara pulled Copper to a halt, her heart seizing in her chest. "Ethan, I see it." A dark column rose against the evening sky, twisting upward from the direction of the ranch. Too much smoke for a cooking fire, too black for burning brush. Something was burning. Something big. "Go," Clara said. "Go now." They pushed the horses hard, abandoning caution for speed. The animals sensed the urgency, their hooves pounding against dry earth, eating up the miles with desperate determination. As they crested the final ridge, Clara's worst fears materialized. The barn was on fire. Flames roared through the structure, consuming wood that had stood for 20 years. Men ran everywhere, some carrying buckets from the spring, others trying to control panicked cattle. The sound of shouting mixed with the crack of burning timber. And in the middle of it all, standing apart from the chaos, was Wade Thornton. Clara kicked Copper into a gallop. "Clara, wait." She didn't hear Ethan's warning, didn't care. All she saw was Thornton watching her world burn with that same cold smile he always wore. She dismounted before Copper fully stopped hitting the ground running. Thornton turned at her approach, his expression shifting from satisfaction to surprise. "Miss Sutton, you're early. I wasn't expecting." Her fist connected with his jaw before he could finish. Thornton staggered back, hand going to his face, eyes wide with shock. His men started forward, but Clara was already on him again, grabbing his collar, shaking him with a fury born of weeks of fear and loss. "You coward! You miserable, pathetic coward! Get her off me!" Strong hands grabbed Clara's arms, pulling her back. She fought them, kicking and screaming beyond reason, beyond control. "Clara!" Ethan's voice cut through the rage. "Clara, stop!" She went still. Breathing hard, heart pounding, she looked around at the faces surrounding her. Thornton's men. Doc Harding. Tom Miller. The ranchers who'd taken shelter on her land. And Ethan standing between her and Thornton, his hand on his gun. "Let her go," he said quietly. The men holding Clara released her. She stumbled forward, and Ethan caught her arm, steadying her. Thornton wiped blood from his lip. "You'll pay for that." "Send me a bill." Clara's voice shook with barely contained rage. "Along with one for my barn, my cattle, and everything else you've destroyed." "I didn't destroy anything. Your barn caught fire while you were gone. Tragic accident." Thornton smiled that awful smile. "These things happen." "You lying, Clara." Ethan's grip tightened on her arm. "Not like this." She wanted to argue, wanted to tear Thornton apart with her bare hands. But she saw the calculation in his eyes, the way his men were positioned, the trap he was waiting for her to walk into. He wanted her to attack again, wanted an excuse to defend himself in front of witnesses. She forced herself to breathe, to think. "Where's Doc?" she asked. "Here." The old man pushed through the crowd, his face streaked with soot. "We've got the fire contained, but the barn's a loss. Most of the cattle are safe. We got them out in time." "How did it start?" Doc's eyes flickered to Thornton, then back. "Hard to say. Could have been anything. Could have been arson. Could have been." Doc's voice was careful. "But proving that would be difficult." Clara understood. Even if everyone knew Thornton was responsible, proving it to a court of law, especially when Thornton probably owned the judge, would be impossible. Thornton knew it too. His smile widened. "Such a shame," he said. "All that work gone in a single night. And with your deadline at the bank tomorrow." He shook his head in mock sympathy. "I suppose you'll be selling after all?" Actually, Clara said slowly, we won't. The smile flickered. We sold the horses to the army. Got contracts for future purchases, too. The money will be at the bank within the week. Clara stepped closer to Thornton, close enough to see the uncertainty flash across his face. Your deadline means nothing now. We have the funds to pay off the debt and rebuild 10 barns if we need to. Silence. Thornton's expression hardened. You're lying. Ask Captain Morrison at Fort Hayes. He'll confirm everything. The gathered crowd began to murmur. Clara saw hope sparking in their eyes, saw the shift in posture from defeat to defiance. This isn't over, Thornton said. Yes, it is. Ethan stepped forward, his voice carrying across the yard. You've lost Thornton. The ranch stays. The spring stays. Your little empire stops growing right here. Thornton's face contorted with rage. For a moment, Clara thought he might actually draw his gun, consequences be damned. Then a new voice spoke. Wade Thornton. Everyone turned. A man in a dusty coat stood at the edge of the yard, a badge glinting on his chest. Behind him, 4 more men sat on horseback, rifles visible. I'm Thornton. Wade said, his voice suddenly cautious. Who's asking? U.S. Marshal James Whitfield. The man walked forward, pulling a folded paper from his coat. I have a warrant for your arrest. The world seemed to stop. Arrest? Thornton's voice cracked. On what charges? Murder, conspiracy to commit murder, land fraud, witness intimidation. The marshal smiled thinly. The list goes on. Seems some of your former business partners decided to talk. Federal prosecutors have been building a case for months. We were just waiting for the right moment to move. Thornton's face went white. His men shifted nervously, hands moving toward their guns. I wouldn't, the marshal said calmly. My men have orders to shoot anyone who interferes with a federal arrest, and trust me, they're very good shots. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Thornton's shoulders sagged. The fight drained out of him like water from a cracked bucket. This is a mistake, he said weakly. I have lawyers. I have friends in Washington. Your friends in Washington are the ones who gave us the warrant. The marshal pulled out handcuffs. Turn around, Mr. Thornton. Hands behind your back. Clara watched as Wade Thornton, the man who'd terrorized the county, who'd driven her uncle to suicide, who'd tried to destroy everything she and Ethan had built, was handcuffed and led away like a common criminal. She waited for satisfaction, for triumph, for some feeling of victory. Instead, she just felt tired. Clara. Ethan's hand found hers. You all right? I don't know. She looked at the burning barn, at the exhausted faces of the people who'd fought beside her, at the sky turning pink with sunset. I thought I'd feel different. I thought when Thornton finally lost, I'd feel happy. Maybe happy comes later. Right now we've got work to do. He was right. The fire was contained, but not out. The cattle needed tending. The people who'd sheltered on their land needed food and rest. There would be time for feelings later. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. Let's get to work. The next 3 days blurred together. They buried the barn, what was left of it, and began planning a new one. The ranchers who'd taken refuge on Ethan's land stayed to help their cattle, mingling with his in the fields around the spring. What had started as a desperate alliance became something more permanent, something that felt like community. The money from the army arrived as promised. Clara paid off the bank debt personally, standing in front of the same desk where Ethan had once begged for more time counting out bills, while Garrison watched with barely concealed amazement. The ranch is yours, the banker said, stamping papers, signing documents. Free and clear. Clara took the deed, held it in her hands, felt the weight of everything it represented. Thank you, she said. Outside, Ethan was waiting. It's done, he asked. It's done. He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for weeks. So what now? Clara looked at the deed, then at him, then at the town spread out around them. Now we build something that lasts. They walked back to the ranch together, leading their horses, talking about the future in a way they'd never been able to before. Plans for the new barn, schedules for the army contracts, ideas for expanding the herd once the drought broke. It felt strange talking about next year, about 5 years from now, about things that assumed they'd both be here together, building a life, but strange in a good way. That evening, the community gathered on Ethan's land for what someone decided to call a celebration. Fires burned where the barn used to stand, cooking meat and warming coffee. Someone produced a fiddle. Someone else brought whiskey. Clara stood at the edge of the light, watching people dance and laugh and celebrate a victory that still didn't feel entirely real. Doc Harding appeared beside her, pipe in hand. "Quite a thing," he said. "All those people who thought they were alone finding out they weren't." "I didn't do anything special." "No." Doc raised an eyebrow. "You walked into a dying ranch with nothing but 5 horses and a stubborn streak. You built a forge that wasn't there. You trained animals that everyone said couldn't be trained. You stood up to Wade Thornton when men twice your size were too scared to look at him." He puffed on his pipe. "Sounds pretty special to me." Clara didn't know what to say to that. "Ethan's looking for you," Doc added. "He's been circling the edge of this party for 20 minutes trying to work up the courage to come over here." Despite everything, Clara smiled. "He has. Man's fought outlaws and killers and survived things that would break most people. But the thought of talking to you turns him into a nervous schoolboy." Doc chuckled. "Go put him out of his misery." She found Ethan by the spring, standing alone, watching the water flow. "Doc said you were looking for me." He turned, and even in the dim light she could see the tension in his shoulders. "I was." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, that's the problem." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "For months, everything was wrong. Fighting to survive racing deadlines, trying to hold off Thornton, I knew how to do that. I knew who I was in the middle of a crisis. And now the crisis is over, and I don't know what comes next." Clara moved closer. "Does anyone ever know what comes next?" "You seem to." "I fake it well." She smiled. "Inside, I'm terrified. We have contracts to fulfill, a barn to rebuild, a ranch to run. The drought isn't over. The work never ends. And somewhere in all of that, I'm supposed to figure out how to have a life." Ethan looked at her. "We could figure it out together." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. "I meant what I said before," he continued, "about wanting to court you properly. But I realize now that was the wrong way to put it. How should you have put it? I should have asked what you wanted." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the stars reflected in his eyes. "Clara, you came here expecting a partnership, a practical arrangement. Instead, you got a disaster. You had every right to leave a dozen times, and you stayed. You fought for this land like it was yours. It is mine, as much as it's yours. Then maybe we should make that official." Clara's heart stopped. "What are you saying?" Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A ring, simple and silver, worn smooth by years of handling. "This was my mother's," he said quietly. "She gave it to my father when they were married, and he gave it back to her on their 20th anniversary. She told me to save it for someone worth fighting for." Clara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "I'm not asking you to answer now," Ethan continued. "I know we haven't known each other long. I know there's still so much we need to learn about each other, but I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." He pressed the ring into her palm. The metal was warm from his touch. "Ethan, you don't have to say anything. I know I don't." She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "But I want to." She slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "I didn't come here looking for love," she said. "I came here looking for a place to belong, for a chance to start over, for something that felt like hope." She took his hands in hers. "I found all of that. But I also found you. And somewhere along the way, this stopped being about survival and started being about something bigger. Clara. Yes, she said. The answer is yes. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that. Ethan's face transformed. The worry, the uncertainty, the fear, all of it melted away, replaced by something that looked like joy. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, holding her like he'd never let go. I love you, he said quietly. I should have said it before now. You said it every day, every time you stayed, every time you fought beside me, every time you chose this ranch, this life over walking away. She pulled back enough to look at his face. I love you too. I think I have since you admitted the truth that first night. I was terrified you'd leave. I was terrified you'd ask me to. They stood together by the spring, the celebration continuing behind them, the future spreading out ahead like an unwritten story. Then Clara laughed. What? Ethan asked. My father would have loved this. He always said I was too stubborn to settle for anything less than exactly what I wanted. She smiled through her tears. I think this qualifies. They walked back to the party hand in hand. The music swelled as they appeared. Someone cheered Doc probably, and suddenly everyone was cheering, raising cups and clapping backs. Tom Miller grabbed Ethan's hand and shook it vigorously. About time you two figured it out. Rest of us have been waiting for weeks. Weeks, Clara laughed. We've barely known each other a month. Long enough for anyone with eyes to see what was happening. Margaret Hayes, the woman who'd outlived 3 husbands, pushed through the crowd and hugged Clara fiercely. You hold on to this one, dear. Good men are hard to find. I intend to. The celebration continued deep into the night. People danced. Stories were told. Promises were made about the future they'd build together. And when the fires finally burned low and the guests began to drift toward their own camps, Clara and Ethan stood alone in the yard where foreclosure notices had once hung. It's strange, Ethan said. This morning I woke up thinking we might lose everything. Now we have more than I ever dreamed possible. That's how life works sometimes. The worst days and the best days are often the same day. That's very philosophical. I've had time to think. Clara leaned against him, exhausted but content. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow we start rebuilding. The barn, the herd, everything Thornton destroyed. And after that we get married, properly, with a preacher and witnesses and everything you deserve. Clara smiled. I don't need a big ceremony. I just need you. You have me. Always. The months that followed tested them in new ways. The drought broke in late September, 3 weeks of steady rain that filled the creek and brought the land back to life. The spring that had saved them continued to flow, a constant reminder of what they'd nearly lost. The new barn went up quickly, built by the community that had formed around Ethan's ranch. What had started as a desperate alliance had become something permanent, a network of families who'd learned that survival meant standing together. The army contracts brought steady income. Clara trained horses and taught others to do the same. Ethan managed the land, the cattle, the endless work of running a ranch that was finally growing instead of dying. Doc Harding delivered the news about Thornton one morning over coffee. Federal court convicted him on 12 counts, he said, tapping his newspaper. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Good, Clara said. She felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet relief that it was finally over. His land's being divided up, courts selling it off to pay restitution to his victims. Doc looked at her meaningfully. Including your uncle's family. There is no uncle's family. He was the last of them. Then the restitution goes to the next of kin. Doc smiled. That's you, Clara. She stared at him. What? The court traced the lineage. Your mother was Henry Sutton's sister. You're his only living relative. I don't want Thornton's money. It's not Thornton's money. It's justice. Doc set down his coffee. Think about what you could do with it. Expand the ranch. Help the families who are still struggling. Build something that would have made your uncle proud. Clara looked out the window at the land that had nearly killed her and had ended up saving her instead. "I'll think about it," she said. The wedding happened on the first day of November, under clear skies, and a sun that had finally stopped trying to burn everything to ash. Clara wore her mother's dress altered by Margaret Hayes's skilled hands. Ethan wore his ranger dress uniform brought out of storage for the first time since El Paso. Doc Harding performed the ceremony. It turned out he'd been ordained 30 years ago, something nobody had known until he mentioned it casually over dinner. The entire community gathered to witness. Tom Miller and Ed Brennan stood beside Ethan. Rosie Chen, the shopkeeper's daughter who'd become Clara's first friend in Copper Creek, stood beside Clara. The words were simple. The promises were sincere. "I, Ethan, take you, Clara, to be my wife, to stand beside you in drought and rain and hardship and plenty for all the days of my life. I, Clara, take you, Ethan, to be my husband, to fight beside you, build beside you, and choose you every day until my last breath." When they kissed, the cheering shook the ground. The celebration lasted 3 days. People came from across the county, some who'd fought beside them, some who'd heard the story, and wanted to be part of something good. On the third night, when the music finally faded and the guests finally left, Ethan and Clara sat on the porch of their home, watching the stars wheel overhead. "Mrs. McAllister," Ethan said, testing the words. "I like the sound of that." "So do I." Clara leaned against his shoulder. "Though I might keep using Sutton for business. Build my own reputation." "You already have a reputation. The woman who saved a dying ranch with 5 wild horses and sheer stubbornness. Don't forget the sheer stubbornness." "Never." He kissed the top of her head. "What are you thinking?" "About the future. About everything we're going to build." She paused. "About the past, too. About my father, my uncle, everyone who didn't get to see this." "They'd be proud of you." "I hope so." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Doc told me about the restitution money from Thornton's conviction. Are you going to take it?" "I don't know. It feels strange profiting from his downfall." "It's not profiting. It's justice." "Maybe." She watched a shooting star streak across the sky. "But if I do take it, I want to use it for something that matters. Something that helps people who are where I was a year ago, desperate, alone, with nowhere to go." "What are you thinking?" "A fund for mail-order brides who arrive to find things aren't what they expected. A way to give them choices instead of traps." Clara's voice strengthened as the idea took shape. No woman should have to stay in a bad situation because she has nowhere else to go. If I can help give them options, give them a way out if they need it. "That's a good idea," Ethan said quietly. "A really good idea. It won't fix everything, but it might help someone. It will." He pulled her closer. "And I'll help you do it. Whatever you need." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate disasters and built something neither of them had expected. Clara thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, the woman on the stagecoach with $5, 5 horses, and no hope. The woman who'd arrived at a dying ranch, expecting to make the best of a bad bargain. She'd found so much more than she'd bargained for. Not a fairy tale, those were for children and dreamers. What she'd found was better. A partnership built on trust, tested by fire, strengthened by every challenge they'd faced together. A love that didn't promise perfection, but promised presence. A home that wasn't just a place, but a choice made new every day. "Ethan. Thank you." "For what?" "For being honest. That first night when you told me the truth about everything, you could have kept lying. Could have let me find out slowly, trapped by my circumstances. But you didn't." "I couldn't. You deserved better than that." "Most men wouldn't have cared what I deserved." "I'm not most men." Clara smiled. "No, you're not." The stars continued their slow wheel across the sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The horses shifted in the corral, and the cattle lowed in the fields beyond. All the sounds of a ranch that was alive. A home that was real. A future that was possible. "Ready to go inside?" Ethan asked. "In a minute." Clara looked out at the land they'd saved, the community they'd built, the life they'd created from nothing but desperation and determination. "I just want to remember this. How it feels right now with everything finally settled. It won't always be this peaceful. I know. There'll be new challenges, new problems, new fights." She turned to look at him. "But we'll face them together. That's the difference now." "Together," Ethan agreed. He stood and offered his hand. Clara took it and let him pull her to her feet. They walked into the house they'd built, the home they'd made, the life they'd chosen. The door closed behind them. Outside, the ranch slept under a blanket of stars. The new barn stood solid and strong. The spring flowed clear and constant. The land once dying now pulsed with possibility. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better. It was earned.